everyone, and welcome. This is episode 286 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I am James, joined once again by Ryan, and stepping in for Paul again this week, Steve Garshinsky. Steve, appreciate you joining us and jeopardizing missing the start of Succession by doing this.
It's okay. I'll deal with it since it's a holiday weekend. I have extra time to catch up. As I'm sure the new Max app will crash consistently if I tried to watch it right when it gets dropped at 8:00. So
yeah, that's kind of a weird time for them to relaunch an app like right before the biggest finale they've had.
Yeah, let's
years.
launch a buggy app right when everybody's going to be watching. Great job.
Yeah,
that's why they get paid hundreds of millions of dollars. David Hasselhoff to be the CEO of Warner Discovery, whatever the hell it is.
Was he the one that got heckled at the graduation? Yes, good.
Yes.
Yeah,
enjoyed that thoroughly.
Yeah. Okay. We'll try to wrap this up just so you can get to that and hopefully avoid all the spoilers online too. Stay off Twitter, Steve. Always good life advice. Stay off Twitter. But other than that, how are you guys' Memorial Day weekends going so far?
I currently have the Eagle Park J. Henry and Sons bourbon barrel aged collab from the Joint Beer Fest, which is like 15% alcohol.
Nice.
So we'll see where we're at by the end of this.
Yeah, I was going to say, as your opinions get
yeah.
wackier and wackier as we go here. So
yeah, Ryan was moving all the funny questions to the end, so we'll see what happens there.
There we go.
Yeah, I did a quick little run up to lacrosse Thursday because we were off on Friday. So Thursday to Saturday night, and then came back and went to the Brewer game today. So I was in house for them to finally win, though it got a little dicey there at the end. And I'm really enjoying the fact that they seem to win every Sunday. Like, this is the reverse of some of the like old teams, the Ned Yost teams, where they'd throw out the
I remember those. Yeah.
And they'd always lose, even though like Ben Sheets would be on the mound and he'd throw like, he'd allow one run and it would be 1-0. So I'm enjoying the Sunday wins. That has been nice to get those, because then we record and we're all in a much better mood and it's not nearly so dour and like, so imagine if we were recording right now coming off of a 4-game losing streak to the Giants. Like, that would just be really depressing and sad.
They're all God Bless America fans on the Brewers roster right now.
Oh yeah,
the Sunday.
Stand and salute.
Stan Kozlowski from Media Relations, or from Guest Relations. Yeah,
Bob
Kozlowski.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. It's Bob. Yes. Why did I think Stan? Yeah,
because we said stand and salute. I don't know.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's probably
off to a great start already this week. Yeah.
Oh, and James, I need to mention this because you are from lacrosse. I was in lacrosse, and Steve oddly hates lacrosse. Like, deeply within his soul hates lacrosse.
I don't hate it.
I got to spend Friday night on the Lacrosse Queen, and that was where I was trying through buggy internet. Oh, for God's sake, children! The Lacrosse Queen is
it's a boat.
It's a boat. It is a river boat, a Mark Twain style river boat on. Jesus. Do we have to get rid of this? We do. We have to get rid of this.
No, we're keeping this. We're keeping this. It's fine.
So anyway, I'm on the riverboat and through buggy internet trying to get updates if Willie Adames is dead or alive, because you're like sending me like apocalyptic messages about like how bad it looked and how terrible it was. But I was getting really spotty internet because we were, up the river where there wasn't great internet until we got under the freeway, and then you could get internet again. So it's like, I'm trying to find out what's going on.
Lacrosse sounds great. I'm glad it's so connected.
I was on the river. I mean, we're on the Mississippi River, Steve. It's, kind of famed in song.
On the Minnesota side of the river. That's why it's so bad over there. Yeah.
Yeah. Got some really great pictures though.
Yeah. All right. Great.
That you couldn't upload and show you were doing anything.
No.
No social content for Ryan in lacrosse.
I snuck him out, got him through every once in a while.
Sure. There you go. All right, let's get to things, even though it's not quite as cheery, although, as Ryan said, a little cheerier than it would have otherwise been. But first, a reminder, you can become a patron at patreon.com/MKE tailgate. Throw a few bucks our way every single month. $2 a month guarantees you get your questions answered, both on this podcast and on reporting as eligible, while $5 gets you that question priority, plus the additional exclusive content, including the Minor League Extra with Ryan and James Anderson of RotoWire, as well as Paul's reporting as eligible mini pods. All right, so as I mentioned, Brewers are heading into Memorial Day, barely clinging on to first place in the NL Central, just a one-game lead over the Pirates, still hanging in there. Brewers lost, of course, as you mentioned, 3 of 4 to the Giants at home over the weekend, and in kind of escaped by the skin of their teeth on Sunday too, despite a 7-0 lead. So, things not feeling so great right now, aside from, that scare from Willy Adames. The entire starting rotation is basically on the injured list. We got a question about that coming up. And the Brewers actually had one of baseball's worst offenses in May. They entered Sunday with a team WRC plus of 80 in May. That's 20%. Average there. That ranks 27th in baseball. They were also 26th in slugging, 28th in on-base percentage, and 26th in batting average. They also ranked 4th in highest strikeout rate. So a lot of tough baseball to watch in May from the Brewers, but they made it through, still holding on to first place. I guess, Steve, my first question for you as guest star here, is this a bad team that seems primed for like a June swoon, or are they just kind of banged up now and had a bad month?
Well, first thing I'll say is it's better to be in first place than not in first place. So let's cling to that. I was kind of curious about some of the questions about the offense, and I went to Fangraphs. I pulled up the team. There are only like 9 hitters that were ranked, and then it was pitchers. Then I realized it's because the other half of the team is all sub-zero WAR.
Mm-hmm.
So they're ranked below the pitchers as far as their production.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
It is. But looking at it, they're all kind of the guy. I think the only one that's really a surprise is Brousseau. Where he's at. Obviously, Winker and Voit have shown they're both garbage. I don't know what to do with them anymore. I've always been kind of like, get what you can out of Tyrone Taylor, but whenever he starts to not be playable, like, get rid of him. And I'd give him a few more weeks, but once they have any kind of substitution for him, I would probably take it. So, I mean, we'll see when Urias comes back too. But I don't know. I don't know if this is a good team or a bad team or a mediocre team right now, because it's been so long since we've seen kind of the starting roster we expected out there in any way. There's some hope. Like, I'm happy with how Contreras is playing. I guess to pick somebody doing well. He's not hitting with the power, but I think between the defense and what he is doing with the bat, Yelich is up and down. Wilson or Owen Miller's gotten hot. Anderson's up and down. When you read the list of names, no, they're not a good team. But I mean, like I said, they're in first place. I think they have some pieces, but this is just going to be a wild ride for the rest of the season. I don't know. And like I said, I'd rather be in first place right now, clinging to it, than whatever's going to happen in September. I think that's going to be a real nail biter by that time.
Yeah, they've banked the wins, and that's important. And right now, I've been saying it for a week plus now, that they're like in survival mode. You're just trying not to rack up too many losses. You need to sneak wins wherever you can. The fact that they were able to get 2 wins this week in Colin Ray starts was kind of remarkable, and he pitched well in those games. I mean, today he gave up the 3-run homer in the 7th when they were trying to push him a little bit too far, and
they were ready to take him out.
Yeah, they were.
And that was the problem. It was like one batter too far.
Yeah, it was. And it's also just, it's one of those things that will kind of happen when everything is going wrong. You'll have situations like that crop up, and it made that game a lot closer than it should have been. But it's also, I could understand, because I was sitting there talking to my dad about it, and it was like, well, I think he's at like 75 pitches coming into that inning. And so you really don't, when you're in as kind of a dire situation as they are in terms of having to have burned through all their pitching, you got to try when you're up 7-1 and you guys in the mid 70s for pitches, you got to try to sneak out a little bit more there. But by the time he put 2 on, I'm like, okay, they're going to yank him after this batter if he doesn't get an out. And of course it ends up going out of the yard. Like, of course it does. Because why wouldn't it go out of the yard at that point? So I think the team that's out there on the field right now is a mediocre to bad team. The team that's out there is not a 80-win team even, I don't think. But, of course, they're scheduled to be getting back all these guys over the coming weeks. I mean, starting with Urias, who's eligible to come off, I believe, on Tuesday, right? I think we decided it was Tuesday. It's either Tuesday or Wednesday he can come off the IL. So starting with him, and then you're going to have guys like Frelick, potentially Luke Voigt, some hitters of that ilk coming back, and then the pitching.
I mean, hold on, we can't really count Frelick yet. I mean,
Frelick is going to be up very soon, Steve.
But he was off to a slow start in AAA.
He had
then
74
he went on the
mediocre
IL.
plate appearances. Yes,
I'm just saying he's going to get some time to try to establish himself in the minors before they make any kind of moves. If they don't, I mean, then this team is really desperate. Then I think they've fallen out of first place by quite a bit by that time.
Well, they got to screw with Weimer's clock, right, Ryan? That's the theory. They sent Weimer down.
They don't need to. They don't have to. It's a thing they could do, but they don't.
Isn't Weimer like 24? Yeah, he was a college guy.
Yeah. It's a thing.
You don't screw. He's old enough. You don't need to screw with the clock at all. He's going to be 30 by the time he's a free agent, no matter what.
Yeah, well, sure. They don't need to do it for a lot of reasons, mostly being that if he does turn into a pretty decent player, they'll almost certainly extend him. So whatever. I'm not worried about that part of things. The pitching part, obviously, they should get Lauer back relatively quick here. So that's good. Miley seems like more mid to late in the month, as does Woodruff, potentially end of June, beginning of July for him, if everything kind of tracks back. At that point, you're kind of looking at what? You have a month until the trade deadline to sort of assess, okay, we've got our horses in here. We've got the guys that we want. How good actually is this team, and what should we be looking at to do at the deadline, right? So I think through this month, you're still really trying to survive for the most part. Maybe start picking up steam and start picking up momentum towards the end of the month as you really start getting your guys back. But for the most part right now, it is still kind of survival mode, and it sucks, but I don't know what else they can really do with the number of injuries of consequence that they've had. It's going to be a thing, and they're going to need guys like talked about, like Jesse Winker. He's going to have to step up. He's going to have to start hitting for some power, or they're going to have to look in a different direction, because he's now dipped down to a 204 batting average, 315 on base, 231 slugging.
Has he even hit a home run yet?
No, he hasn't. And so the concern is that his power is sapped and gone for good, and we're not going to see it at any point this year. That is the, rising concern that I think a month ago we were kind of poo-pooing.
Winker hasn't even elevated a ball for us to judge whether or not he has power.
Yeah, he really hasn't. There have been few warning track shots even. Yeah, he's not.
I mean, he doesn't even get the
hard.
ball in the air. It's like he's working out with Christian Yelich every day in the batting cage.
And there it is. So anyway, we have to. There's going to be changes that are made. Jonathan Judge pointed out in a tweet the other day that, like, you could see some really radical changes coming to what this team is going to look like a month from now, from today to a month from now, and the team could just look completely different by that point. So at this point, and here's one for you. Guess who is still on Baseball References? They are still 11th on this team in Baseball Reference WAR. It would be Brandon Woodruff, who hasn't.
Woof.
Yeah, so
hasn't pitched in a month. Yeah,
yeah. And granted, he did really well in those first two starts, and that's why he has 0.6 wins above replacement. But still, not an ideal situation to be in. So, yeah, it's really hard to say at this point. I don't think it's fair for us to really judge one way or another, other than saying that the team as constructed right now is not all that good, but they have so many guys coming back and to potentially add to the roster that there are real chances that they can be better. So we just have to wait and see how that plays out.
I guess on the topic of those injuries, that leads us to our first Patreon question of the week, coming from Luke Roy's Suitcase, who's asking, who would win a game between the Brewers IL and the current team starting Colin Ray? So the IL for the Brewers definitely looks sort of like an all-star team in some ways. Ryan, who would win if you put those squads up against each other?
Yeah, I mean, you could really, if you start allowing, and Steve is very vociferous about not allowing this, but if you're allowing AAA players to be involved in that squad who are currently injured, like Sal Frelick and Keston Hiura.
If Frelick's not on the 40-man.
Neither is Keston Hiura.
Yeah. So no, you don't get to include those guys.
But they are on the IL and would probably be on the team right now if it weren't for that fact. So
they're not.
The point is that they are on the minor league IL and would probably be here if they weren't. So anyway, point being, once you start adding up Adames, Urias, Garrett Mitchell, they'd maybe be a little thin in the outfield if I'm not allowed to use Sal Frelick, but I think I should be allowed to use Sal Frelick for this completely, silly exercise. But then, pitching staff wise, you're great because you could just run like a sequence of like Brandon Woodruff can go 5-6 innings for you. And then you can use like Eric Lauer for an inning. You can use Wade Miley for an inning. You can use Aaron Ashby for an inning. You have some real flexibility in terms of what you're going to do with the pitching side of things. So if you're forced on the hitting side, or on the healthy side, to use Colin Ray as your starter and not use, say, Corbin Burns or Freddie Peralta, who both have their struggles, then I could see starting to give the edge to the team that's hurt, and that's kind of wild.
Even a struggling Corbin Burns is not going to struggle with Luke Voigt, so I'm not worried about the starters.
Yeah, you could play Keston Hiura in the outfield if we give that to you, but no.
Yeah.
Luke Voigt, Urias kind of struggling in his rehab assignment too, but we'll see how he does when he comes back up. Second question of the week here from Made Wiley, asking, how much is Steve missing Brent Suter right now?
I don't like social media content, and the pitch clock has sped everyone up, so he doesn't have that advantage anymore. So I'm fine with Brent Suter not being on the team.
It is funny, though. Have you looked at his numbers? Did you actually pull them up?
No, I know. He'd be useful. What I do I like relief pitchers who can go multiple innings. That I will say is very much a thing I like. So Brent Suter was always that guy, and I appreciated that, especially with the rubber arm. With the way this team's constructed right now, they could use that. But I know that was just last season when he was struggling, and we were definitely throwing dirt on the grave for him.
You were, I was not.
Yeah, no, I'll totally own that. Well, but the problem is, again, when you have a guy who's kind of like living on the edge as far as what his stuff is and what his effectiveness is, like when it goes, it's going to go quick and it's going to be ugly. So when that was happening, it's like, I don't know, is this the time that it actually happens? So, I mean, Brent Suter would be useful, but I mean, they need starters at this point. Suter would be helpful, but it's not going to,
he would help
cover over all of the issues they have right now.
Yeah, he would take some run in the middle. Actually, given he was a starter, a swingman for a while for the Brewers, they might actually
starter again.
Yeah,
they may have pushed him into that. Just for those who are listening and don't want to look it up, Brent Suter in 31 2/3 innings this year has 28 strikeouts and a 1.99 ERA. And that's over 22
for the Rockies. Wow. Yeah.
And that's over 22 games. So like Steve was talking about here, 31 2/3 innings in 22 games. He is going multiple innings often. And that is super important. And it's part of the reason why I'm very thrilled that Bryce Wilson has been as good as he has been for the Brewers this year. Like that's been super important to them being decent. And I think I called him something else last week. I don't think I called him Bryce Wilson.
No, you kind of flubbed that. I forget what it was,
I forget what I called him, but it was not Bryce Wilson. So yeah.
All right. Moving on, we've got Brian Polakowski asking a couple of questions here. First of all, is it more concerning that Mike Brasso has a higher OPS than half of our hitters, 7-11, 8th out of 16, or a lower ERA than half the pitchers at 386, 13th out of 25 pitchers so far? We verified this, and not only that, but his ERA plus was what, like 126, 124, something like that. That's absurd. But he's pitched a lot, Ryan, lately. So I guess which of those is more concerning to you?
I mean, I am still more concerned about the hitting because I feel like the pitching, if and when you're able to get these guys back and healthy, they should be, considerably better. And I like the progress of so many guys in the bullpen. Payamps has been good. Wilson has been good. Williams has been great. Like, I feel pretty good about a lot of what's going on out there. So when you get your horses back, I'm going to feel relatively okay about the pitching. I do still wonder, we're like a big power, middle of the order anchor bat short right now. And I don't know where that's coming from because it's not coming from Sal Frelick. As much as I would like to see him come up and I think he can be an injection this team needs, especially on the on-base percentage side. He's not going to hit for power, so he's not that guy. So I'm going to lean to the hitting side here and go, yeah, it's kind of a bad sign that he is in that situation. And also just like I can't cite it, but somebody pointed out on Twitter that he was like 7th on the team in appearances since May 15th because he keeps getting into blowouts when they're getting their butt kicked. I mean, that's not great. So
I mean, it's 3 appearances, but still not great.
Well, it feels like they've given up 15 plus runs once a week now.
Well, they did it twice this week. They did it on Monday and Friday.
Yeah.
Plus the Cardinals game from the other week. So
yeah. It's definitely killed their Pythag. So that's a thing that is even less
useful.
The real
thing that matters. Yes.
Well, it's even less useful than it normally is because it's always under Craig Counsell and David Stern / Matt Arnold. The Pythag record for this team has always been less telling because they just manage it in such a way that like they're going to win close games and they're going to just, when they're losing, they're just going to punt games. And so the punts are going to result in these big scores. And so that's going to mean the Pythag is not as useful for us as it generally historically has been. Though I think Pythag in general is less useful now than it is because more and more teams are seeing the wisdom of just punting games when you're down, the way the Brewers have for a while now.
Right. And that kind of leads me to the second half of Brian Polakowski's question here, asking, once Paul finishes his secret Yelly hitting coach assignment, can he work on figuring out what this team needs to do to win a come-from-behind victory? Is it me, or does this team turtle into their shell whenever they get behind? So, Steve, do you feel that, like, especially, I guess, lately this month when the offense has been that bad, it's like the second they get behind,
I mean, a struggling offense isn't, holding on to games that they have a lead, let alone coming back from behind. So, that's just a function of not being able to score runs. Regardless of, when they're scored, they're just not scoring runs to begin with. Because I think every game we're like, oh, here's another shutout. It feels like that's coming every single time. Which is tough to watch. It really is. It gets really difficult when you've had a combination of blowouts and shutouts. Other teams just blowing up the scoreboard and then the Brewers just not putting up runs. So I don't think it's a matter of like they can't score at the end of games. They've had trouble scoring regardless. So yeah, obviously making comebacks at the end of a game is going to be a tall order for this team. Does it change? I mean, yeah, when they get some guys back in the order that make better sense than what they currently have. But, again, there isn't a big bat that's going to return and change things significantly. I mean, even Adames, who's hit with power, hasn't been a great hitter this season.
Yeah, sure. No, that's true. I think that the main thing I've learned from following baseball really closely for 20 plus years at this point like really, really closely. Because I followed it when I was a kid, but not as close as I have as an adult. One thing I've learned is that there's never an acceptable way to lose games. If you're losing from behind, if you're losing from ahead, if you're losing from whatever, there's never an acceptable way to lose a game. So just as long as you're losing, that's always going to be bad. And the coming from behind to win, I don't know. I don't have the numbers. I've tried to look and I can't seem to find like what the actual numbers on that are, if they're particularly bad at it. But I would imagine, because their offense has been, below average this year, it's been much worse than last year, that is probably true. Though it seems like a long time ago, when they were winning a bunch of games early in the season, remember guys, when they were like, I don't know, like 15-6 or something?
Yeah, anecdotally, early in the year, I felt like there were at least a couple of walk-offs or come from behind things, like the Garrett Mitchell-driven stuff. We haven't really seen it since then. But yeah, I guess I don't have the raw numbers, but, anecdotally, I guess it makes sense. If that's stuff was going your way early in the year, maybe that kind of averages out in the next month. But man,
yeah, I mean, and that's the other problem is early in the season, it seemed like they were getting all of the key hits right when they needed them. They had runners on base. They were driving those guys in. You look at the box score at the end of the day, it wasn't a lot of hits, but they seemed to be converting. And it's just like we're getting the flip side of that now as you watch 162 games, and that regression happens. And I just think it's that combination of the regression as far as what they're hitting with runners in scoring position is versus, what they're getting out of their pitching staff as well. That's now been decimated. You kind of get into these rough stretches like this. And they just got to battle through it.
Yeah.
There's nothing else to do besides battle.
That's the problem. Yeah, that's the problem with all of this. It's kind of like, what's the solution? It's like, wait for guys to get back. I don't know. There aren't a lot of moves you can make in May.
Yeah.
There just aren't. Even in June, you're not going to see a lot of movement.
Well, I think you have to take particular pleasure in the victories right now, especially when you have somebody like we talked about. Colin Ray this week was huge for them. Being involved in a win over Houston and the win today over San Francisco, he pitched well and was a big reason why they were in those games and did well in those games. And you have to take that and go, okay, we don't plan on having Colin Ray be good for like the bulk of the season, but if you can win some games that he starts, that is buying yourself breathing room and it's keeping yourself alive. Like this week was awful. It was like a dreadful, awful week, and they came out of it 3-4. And that's not terrible, especially considering, I don't know if you realized coming into these series, both Houston and San Francisco have not been great teams this year, but both were insanely hot coming in. Yeah. Both teams entered play against the Brewers on the runs of their season so far with big winning streaks. And so coming out of that, yes, it's at home, but yes, they've also been injured, but managing to sort of survive that and to come out of it 3-4, okay, it keeps you afloat. Coming out of this week, 1-6 or 2-5, something like that, would have been a much larger disaster than where you ended up here. 3-4, you could sort of survive it and you just advance and you keep going and you could sort of keep going. And that's the mode they're in right now. And hopefully as bodies start to return, they're able to stabilize. But yeah, there's nothing to do here except kind of sit and hope, and maybe they can try and swing a trade or try and do something else. The Julio Teheran pickup was good. He gave them a good start on Thursday night, right? He did a good job. Yeah. I was driving during it, so I didn't really see it, but he did a good job. It kept them in that game. The offense couldn't muster anything there. It's that kind of stuff. You're just going to have to hope that they can pull through enough decent performances while they're still at such a lowered level of strength here, and then go out and look for, real solutions to try to put them over the top if they're still in this thing when we get to the end of June.
Yeah, I think it was kind of encouraging too that we kind of got another glimpse of the real Corbin Burns, I guess you could call it, on Saturday as he went toe-to-toe with Logan Webb there. Ultimately, didn't work out in the end for the Brewers. Peter Strzelecki giving up his first home run at AmFam all year, which again, when things aren't going well, those are the type of fluky things that happen, right? But I think that was encouraging to see too. If he can kind of get back to missing bats, I think that'll be key in June too, as we wait for the rest of the rotation to come up. All right, Woodridge Joe, another question here asking, I'll take the blame for Peralta's poor start on Friday after my question about regression last week. But I think we can all agree that Ryan deserves the blame for Alex Wood's strong performance. But the question, what are we to expect David Stern's current role is with the team? Advisor to Matt Arnold, guy that tells stories and drinks all the coffee in the front office, or not actually involved at all? So, Steve, let's start with you. What exactly is David Stearns doing these days?
I have no idea, but I would imagine it's mostly biding his time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know, and I mean, that's no knock against Stearns. I think that's just kind of the situation they're in. It was the guy ready. Yeah, it was the guy ready to step down. You know, I don't know if teams were willing to give up something to get him, if that was an issue. But it was basically wait out a year and then you can go do what you want. And I think that's currently what's happening. So will he probably be there if Matt Arnold has questions or, needs somebody to confide in? Sure, probably. But aside from that, I think Stearns probably has very little to do with the team, especially day to day, like nothing to do with this team.
Yeah. Didn't he say something in the preseason press conference or whatever? Was he basically like, or when they announced it or when they did this and Stearns was sitting there, he was basically like, well, Matt has my number if he needs it. And it was kind of like deuces. Yeah. So,
yeah.
And by the way, John Heyman is already starting to talk about can the Mets get the Billy Epler, David Stearns dream team together for the Mets? So that's coming.
Sure. Why not? If they want to do it, yeah, you can go out and pay for it at the end of the season.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to be what he's going to want to do, because he dumped a whole bunch of money on this Mets team right now to be good, and they're kind of middling to bad. Like, they're looking up at the Brewers in terms of win-loss record right now. So that whole thing,
Epler might just get fired. That's the thing.
Yeah. I don't know how much of that is the thing. I think they knew that they were kind of playing with fire with basically taking on all this age and all of that. And to be fair, the Mets, most of that payroll expires. Like, they have a lot of money coming off the books.
Except for Bobby Bonilla.
Yes. that beautiful thing, as Bobby calls it. So, but yeah, I don't think he is really involved at all with this team at this point. I think part of the reason he stepped down was he knew going forward it's going to be Matt Arnold. He knew that it wasn't fair to stick around and to be part of making decisions that he wasn't going to have to live with the long-term consequences of, right? And so it was time. Right. He knew he was not going to be with this team past this year, and knowing that, it was time to just hand it over to Matt Arnold and let the team be his. So,
well, and it also, if he was clearly leaving, how much current information, do they want him walking out the door with?
Right.
Like, also, as a transition, he's not quite as closely entwined with the inner workings of the team anymore. And I mean, I don't want to get into like conspiracy theories about that, but I think that's just kind of the way it works. Like, okay, we'll transition you out and it'll make you taking another role right away not as problematic as it could be, basically taking proprietary information.
I severely doubt David Stearns is reading their draft scouting reports for this year's upcoming draft. I would be shocked if he had, an active password to whatever that database is, whatever the version of because Cleveland has Diamond Mind, whatever the Brewers version of Diamond Mind is, I don't think he has access to it, or at least God, I hope not.
He is a Jeff Luhnow disciple, and Jeff Luhnow did hack into the Cardinals database, so
it's true.
I don't know. All right, Jay Google, a question for you guys, asking, can Steve break down the Yelich swing and fix him? Also, what do you make of MLB putting pressure on the state to make upgrades to the ballpark? This is why we don't want Mark to sell. Someone could easily get up and move the team if they spend $2 billion on the team. So, Steve, first of all, can you fix Christian Yelich?
No. And I laugh every time Paul says, just give me X amount of days with Yelich and I'll fix him. Because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Well, of course not. That's the joke.
I assume his method of fixing Yelich involves like saltwater soaked bamboo and like whipping him in the leg to like basically stay in on the ball. So he pulls it. That's how I picture it.
We did talk about a Clockwork Orange sort of situation. Like
I was thinking more like deer
deer hunter. Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
basically Yelich would be going through his own personal Vietnam with Paul, I think, if he was going to try to fix the swing.
So, yeah, no, I don't think Steve could fix Christian Yelich. So let's go on to the next part of this question, which is the more interesting part of this, which is
Major League Baseball is always trying to extort everybody.
Yes,
so,
of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Give us money. Yeah, sure. We know you want money.
And they're doing it at a really dumb time, though, too, right? Like,
or is it? Hold on. Is it the perfect time?
They're not going to go anywhere.
Well, no.
They have nowhere to go.
I think the theory that they're operating under, whether or not this is going to come to fruition, I don't know. People have cast doubts on this. But my working theory is that right now the state sitting on a bunch of money has the Brewers' interest peaked, and they are saying, hey, there's a big pile of money sitting there that the state has access to right now, and wouldn't it be nice if we could get access to that? And they obviously reached out to the governor and got it put in that original budget proposal that the money was going to come out of the state surplus. So clearly they're looking at this as, hey, here's an opportunity. We can do this without necessarily having to levy a new tax, without having to do those things. If we can just get the state legislature to agree to give up, 7%, not even, of the surplus, to earmark it for this purpose. That, I think, is what they're doing here. That's what they're trying to do, right? Whether or not it's going to be successful, whether or not the politics of it work, I don't know. But that's clearly what they're trying to do, is they're trying to get their grubby little paws on a chunk of surplus money because it's there. And it's presumably burning a hole in everybody's pocket.
I'd like to see Mr. Reasonable Business Mind Rob Manfred go in and negotiate with a frickin' just idiot like Robin Voss. It would be, I just want to watch that. It would be like an episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia where like Charlie and Mac go in and talk to the lawyer.
Yes, it is. This is where James does his shrink back into the bushes like Homer Simpson.
Robin Voss would be talking about like bird law, and why they need to keep the money because of bird law or something like that. Yeah, it would be the most ridiculous thing you could ever imagine. And we're like, these are people with power. It's fucking absurd.
It is absolutely. And I now have to note that I'm going to put in the explicit tag here. So
Should a Major League Baseball team get money, get any of the surplus money? No, but the state's not doing anything with it. I guess at least something would happen with it if they gave it to the Brewers. So I don't even know it. That's how bad this is. It's broken me down where I'm like, yeah, fucking give the Brewers the money because you're not doing anything else with it.
So, and this is the thing about this too, is like, we're both opposed pretty strongly to the idea of giving public tax dollars to billionaires or rich people for their stadiums when they should just build them themselves the way they do over in socialist Europe. But having said that, you then look at it and go, well, aren't they just going to be handing this to a bunch of rich people anyways? Isn't the whole point of this is it's going to end up as tax cuts for rich people? So at least
it would stay in Milwaukee County.
At least if they did that, it would be money going to rich people to keep the Brewers in Milwaukee, which I care about and would like to see happen. So like, of the possible outcomes of what can happen with this money, given our current political reality, I'm like, yeah, just handing it over to handing it over to the Brewers is like one of the less offensive things they could do with my money. So like, I'm almost kind of just like, okay, fine, whatever. You're going to do something horrible with it anyway. Might as well just keep the team in town with it while we're at it, right? So
just sitting on it is horrible enough. It's everybody's money. You have paid these taxes, and your money's just sitting there, and they're holding your money hostage. We should all be like righteously pissed off about this.
Well, there are a lot of people very righteously pissed off about it. Should we go on to the next question?
Yeah, let's.
Yeah, no, way to go, Tea Party. They're all holding on to your money. Way to go.
Mark Pod Scarby.
No, these people need to hear the truth.
We can keep yelling about this because we're on the same.
We're going to talk about the truth on this podcast.
Oh boy.
Join me on Twitter Spaces for more.
Are you launching your campaign, Steve? Is that what's going on now?
I hear it's very stable and reliable.
Yeah. That and HBO Max. Okay, Mark Von Scarby asking, with the latest news regarding AmFam Field and MLB stating that the stadium needs repairs done, it raises the question of liability in my eyes. The stadium is owned by the Southeast Wisconsin Professional Baseball Park District, and they are responsible for maintaining the park and keeping it in, quote, the top 25% of all MLB ballparks. But the sales tax for the city stopped being collected a few years ago. So if this district ran out of money, would the city be liable to pay for the upgrades? Or if the city couldn't or wouldn't, what would the repercussions be for breaking the end of their lease? I have no idea. Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, I don't have details on this, but I can give you some insight here. There is money being set aside right now at the state level. Evers mentioned this. There is money set aside right now by the state for the Brewers to continue meeting this obligation. There is money that has been like held over in a kitty for this exact purpose. So it's not like they are completely bereft of money here. What they're asking for is on top of the money, because they're already, what did Mark mention to us in our group chat this week, Steve, that they're already putting in a new Jumbotron next year, and that's coming out of this money from the...
Yeah, it's like a $6.5 million new scoreboard.
Mm-hmm. And that's just part of the normal, like, we have to upgrade the stadium to keep it up with the top 25% in ballparks, which is why when they put in the ribbon boards, they did that because that was like, okay, this has become a thing in every stadium, so now we have to put in the ribbon board, so they did that.
I thought Milwaukee was the only one that had that, and it really pissed off Tony La Russa.
Yeah, well, yes.
It's the only place they have a ribbon. It's the only place with the ribbon board and a roof.
Yes.
There are no other stadiums that fit that description.
Yeah, so like as far as liability and like keeping it up to spec, like they're going to have to do repairs. They'll have to do things like that. But technically that's the responsibility of the stadium district, and funding the stadium district, they already have quite a bit of funding. My understanding is they have the funding they need to go through the lease. I think this is correct. To make it through the lease with the expected repairs that have to be done, they had that money set aside. That's why they sunsetted the tax, because they had the money they needed to be able to fulfill their obligation of the lease.
Have they said what specifically the repairs are?
They've mentioned some various things. They're going to be doing some expansion of things. They'll be putting in like an outdoor...
Expansion is different than repairs.
They're going to be putting in some they've specifically said they're going to be putting in some outdoor spaces. Think Deer District. They're going to be doing some of that stuff outside of the stadium. They are going to have to do repairs to the roof, because they always have to do repairs to the roof because it's, expensive. So those things are also part of it. How much of it is to keep it in condition and how much of it is to make it better, I don't know. And I think that's, and like other things, they're going to need to replace the seats at some point. A lot of those seats are starting to get pretty broken down. We were just looking at the seat, the row in front of us in our season seats, and we're like, yep, still broken, still not fixed. Even though we reported it. So like there are things that are going to need to be done as just part of an aging stadium. And this is setting aside money to do that, but it is definitely also to do capital improvements. They have their mindset on making it more of I think what they would like to do is create a place where people will come and watch and drink and eat to watch Brewers games when they're on the road, the way the Deer District is set up to do that for the Bucks in the playoffs. Whether that's realistic, I don't know. It's weird, but that is part of what they're doing, because that's how, remember, basically all ownership at this point in baseball, they're all trying to become real estate magnates too. They're all trying to get pieces of real estate near their stadiums and become landlords, to become, condo developers, to become restaurateurs, to become bar owners. Like that's,
I think robber
doing.
barons is the term you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different, but yeah, it's they're looking
as they wear their top hats and build their theaters.
Yes, there's definitely a Monopoly Man aspect of this going on. So, but ultimately here, this is going to get done. Or do any of us think? Just a quick survey. Anybody think this isn't going to get done and relatively soon?
It's going to get done, and that's why the league threatening to move them is so stupid. Is
it?
Yes.
Okay, because this is my feeling on it is Manfred was called in to get the deal over the goal line. They have a framework for something that could potentially work for all sides, and Manfred came in to apply the threat to get them over the goal line and to get the deal done at that point. That's the way I read it. But that
I think
totally
part
wrong.
of the issue is with the market size and the attendance they have. Where else are they going to go and get that guaranteed revenue?
Exactly.
I 100%
Charlotte's
agree.
not doing that. Nashville's not doing that. Portland's not doing that. No, there's nowhere to go other than worse markets than Milwaukee.
Yeah, I think if you want to move to any of those other markets, like, you risk the fact that attendance will significantly drop.
Right.
Interest will drop. And the other thing that they have is, I think a lot of those markets don't have other teams situated as closely as Milwaukee does, which also helps. Milwaukee can draw from Chicago. It'll draw from St. Louis. Like, it has some ability that, I think some of these other locations, when you're talking about Nashville or Portland or places like that, who's nearby that's going to drive to those locations?
Well, the other thing is you have to, when you go to a new market like that, you have to build a fan base. You have to sort of build it up. Initially, yes, there will be a lot of interest, and there will be a lot of people who are coming because, hey, there's a baseball team in town now, and I should go check it out. But
a major league team.
Right. Will they become hardcore, passionate fans of that team? People that are the driving force, the way that Milwaukee fans have really outperformed their market size since the 50s, going back to the Braves era. Will they do that? That is taking a significant chance that I think it would be silly. I think it would be foolish for MLB to leave a market that's as viable as Milwaukee, because we do, and I say we, the people of Milwaukee, the people who support this team, the fans, us, we have consistently outkicked our coverage, I guess, on this. That's not the right metaphor, but we have consistently overperformed what you would expect from the market in terms of attendance, in terms of ratings. We put butts in the seats and we go to games and we pay attention to this team in a way that not all markets, the Pirates owners and the Reds owners would kill to have the kind of fan engagement that has existed in Milwaukee basically forever. So they would kill for that. They don't have that. And so for the league as an entity to piss that away would be a really, really dumb decision. And I can't see them making it. I think that places like Nashville, Charlotte, Portland are going to get teams, but it's going to be expansions. It's not, they're not going to be pulling them from Milwaukee, because Milwaukee is a very viable Major League Baseball market.
We've heard JR and others say too, like, MLB's in the business of making money, and the Brewers make a lot of money for the market size. They're not going to screw that up.
Milwaukee outplays its Pythag. There you go. That's the
there you go. That's the analogy you need. Yes.
Thank you.
There you go. All right. Just a couple of Twitter questions to wrap things up this week, as Steve goes and gets another beer. Clearly needed another one after that 12% hitting pretty hard. Jay Bartholomew on Twitter asking, what's making the games go faster, the pitch clock or the Brewers offense, Steve?
So my dad was at the game on Wednesday, and he thought it was great that that game was done in like 2 hours.
2 hours flat almost.
Yeah. And it was, I'm like, oh, let me tell you, I was at the Sheets PV game. I bring that up only because I bring it up to Ryan so many times. I think I've brought it up on this podcast before.
Many, many, many times. And
I know JR was like, it's the fastest game in Milwaukee or in Miller Park since the Sheets PV game. I'm like, it's the fastest game in American Family Field history. Let's get that right.
Yeah.
Anything before doesn't count. This is the fastest game in American Family Field history.
You are turning into your father. Like you have completed the transition. You have become Paul. Like,
it happens.
Absolutely.
It happens to the best of us.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what are you going to do? Yeah, when the offense doesn't get hits, when they don't score runs, or the only runs they score are solo home runs.
Yeah.
I mean, legitimately, yeah, it's not going to take very long to get through those games.
We were impressed today that it took almost a half hour to get through the first inning because the Brewers put 3 runs on, and the Giants did have a couple runners on, even though they ended up getting out of it without any run scoring. So it was like a half hour. It was like, oh, this is like what baseball used to be like in the before times. And now, we don't have that anymore. So my dad and I both noted that because I was telling him as we were getting ready to go into the game, I'm like, you are going to be so amazed how this just clips along now. And it just do. And we had basically a 3-hour game today. I mean, granted, it ended up being 7-5.
It's weird when it starts pushing 3 hours.
Yeah.
Like I legitimately go, oh wow, this game's taking a while. What's going on? We must have a lot of pitching changes. I don't know what's happening. So it would be nice if the games were longer because we're like, oh, look at the Brewers getting so many guys on base and scoring runs. But I mean, that pitch clock is really doing its work this year. It is. It's significant. It's very noticeable. And I know people like to blame pitcher injuries on it and ignore the fact that they're all throwing like 99.
Yeah.
And that is stress on an arm that just shouldn't happen. It's that pitch clock, no matter what, is making just such a massive difference this season.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely is.
Speaking of inept offense, our last question of the week comes from Pastor Goober asking if you had to keep Jesse Winker or Luke Voigt in the lineup for the rest of the season, which one do you choose, Ryan?
I choose death. I don't know about you, Ryan.
I mean, I don't think there's any real choice to be made here. Jesse Winker has both been better than Luke Voigt this year. Oh, I guess he's actually dropped slightly below in terms of OPS, but the on-base percentage, he's 30 points higher in on-base percentage. So,
he's taken a walk. So, yeah.
So he's better. He's both been better than Luke Voigt, and also has, I don't think anybody would argue, he has considerably more upside than Luke Voigt. So, between those two things, there's not really a question here. It's you keep Jesse Winker and you try to get this to work, but man, at some point, if he's just not making any hard contact at all, I don't know what you do. Maybe he goes on the Phantom and you let him go down to AAA for a little while and see if you can get him to do something with his swing, with his neck, with his back. I don't know what you have to do, but like you're going to have to do something to try to get him to hit for some power because right now it is not working.
I don't know. It's been a cold spring, and at least Voigt pops a couple buttons and raises the temperature in AmFam Field a little bit.
That's good, Steve. That's good.
All right. Let's wrap.
Hey, we need a little sex appeal in that place, right?
Yeah. The big beef boys need to start showing. Yeah. I don't know.
Need a little slab of meat in there. Everybody can just kind of slobber over.
Ryan's just over this right now. He wants to end.
I'm going to have to edit so much.
We're at like an hour of recording now, and this final cut's going to be like 40 minutes with how much he has to cut out. All right. Thanks for the questions this week, everybody. As a reminder, patrons do get question priority. So go to patreon.com/MKE tailgate, just $2 a month. Make sure that we answer your question, no matter how silly or ridiculous it is.
The uncut version should be on Patreon.
Oh yeah, maybe we could do that for the $10 level we haven't been using. We'll do yeah.
I still have
tailgate
some saved stuff, some Brad After Dark material from 2000.
Oh no,
or from 2020 that I could throw out there as well. So yeah.
No, that we don't need to get anybody in trouble.
You don't sound confident.
Okay, can we just finish this so I don't have to edit everything out?
Losing my train of thought. This is a good one. Definitely Memorial Day weekend. So even if you're not a patron, you can go and support us another way. You can go and leave a 5-star review or rating over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you listen to us. Just leave a 5-star review. Help us climb the rankings that way. Tell your friends about us. Share our stuff on social. Check us out on YouTube. Any of that stuff is definitely greatly appreciated. While you're there, please do hit all subscribe buttons that you see on whatever page that may be to make sure you don't miss an episode. This was an eventful week. Thank you, Steve, for stepping in. Great advertisement for the 608 Brew or whatever you were drinking.
That was Jay Henry and Sons collab with Eagle Park.
There you go. Yeah, definitely.
I think it was a bourbon barrel aged 18 months.
Very tasty. Sounds great. Go have another one, Steve. We'll get you out of here. You've already missed the first 10 minutes of Succession, so we'll wrap things up here, and you can go catch up. In the meantime, we'll be back here next week to recap the Brewers' road trip through Toronto and Cincinnati. Hopefully, a few more wins, a few more hits, a few more runs. We'll join you here next week on Milwaukee's Tailgate. Have a good week, everybody.
Fair weather fan, it's not what I am, even though the zip code has changed. I might smile and joy where I'm currently employed. Your soul can't be rearranged, and it's hard to understand. So hard to understand. Fair weather, fair weather.